What if I told you there's a house so cursed that even in broad daylight, people cross the street to avoid looking at it? A place the villagers call the Hollow House because its windows never reflect light, they just swallow it whole. For decades, they've whispered about screams in the night, shadows crawling on walls, and people who go inside but never come back. Most call it superstition. But three friends, Amir, Sarah, and Fahad, decided to prove everyone wrong. At midnight, they stepped inside that rotting house, and only two of them came back. What they saw, what followed them home, and what still haunts them to this day will make you question whether some places aren't abandoned, but alive. Imagine a house so feared that even in broad daylight, people cross the street just to avoid walking past it. A place where windows gape like empty eyes, and the doors hang crooked like a mouth that has been waiting to swallow something whole. In the small, forgotten village of Darya Kel, such a house existed. Locals called it the Hollow House. Every story about it began the same way. Strange screams at night, flickering lights even when no electricity flowed, shadows moving against walls when no one was inside. For the villagers, these weren't just tales for children. They were warnings carved into the memory of generations. But you know how it goes. Outsiders never take village legends seriously. Sarah, a 19-year-old student visiting her grandmother for the weekend, heard the stories and couldn't resist. She had grown up in the city where people laughed at ghosts and superstitions. To her, the house wasn't a threat. It was an adventure. Her two best friends, Amir and Fahad, had come along for the trip. Amir was quiet and thoughtful, the kind of guy who always noticed the small things others missed. Fahad was the joker of the group, loud, confident, and skeptical of everything. If there was a rational explanation, Fahad would find it. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Sarah's grandmother sat by the fire, her hands moving steadily over her prayer beads. Sarah leaned closer, mischief in her eyes. "Daddy, what's the story of the Hollow House? Why is everyone so scared of it?" Her grandmother's hands froze for a second. She glanced at Sarah, her eyes sharp despite her age. "Don't play with that place, child. It remembers." The room went silent. The words were heavy like a curse. Amir shifted uncomfortably, but Fahad chuckled. "Remembers? What's it gonna do, Daddy? Write our names on the wall?" Her grandmother said nothing more. She just shook her head, whispering under her breath as if to protect herself. That was all the encouragement Sarah needed. Later that night, while the three sat under the stars, she leaned in and whispered, "We should go." "Go where?" Amir asked, though he already knew. "The Hollow House. At midnight. If there's anything real in there, it'll show itself then." Amir's stomach knotted. Midnight wasn't just a time, it was a threshold, the hour where silence was deepest and shadows felt alive. He opened his mouth to refuse, but Fahad slapped his knee and grinned. "Finally, a real adventure. I'll prove to you both that it's nothing but dust and rats." Amir sighed, torn between fear and pride. The last thing he wanted was to be the coward of the group, so he nodded, even though a quiet voice inside him whispered, "Don't go." That night, as the clock struck 12, the three of them slipped out of the house, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Ahead, in the moonlight, stood the Hollow House, waiting, and with every step closer, Amir swore he felt the air grow colder, as if the house already knew their names. The gate creaked as Fahad shoved it open. Rust flakes crumbled under his touch, and the noise echoed like a groan through the still night. Beyond the gate, weeds clawed up from the ground, taller than their knees, hiding broken stones and shards of glass. The Hollow House loomed above them, 2 stories of rotting wood and cracked plaster. The roof was jagged, like broken teeth silhouetted against the moon. Windows gaped black and hollow, not reflecting the moonlight, but swallowing it. Sarah grinned nervously, pulling her hoodie tighter. "See, not so scary." But Amir didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the top window. For a second, just a second, he thought he saw movement. Something pale, like a face withdrawing into the dark. He blinked, and it was gone. Inside, the air was heavy and stale, thick with the smell of wet soil and something metallic. Like rust or old blood, their flashlights cut through the darkness, beams shaking slightly as their hands trembled. Every step they took made the floorboards groan, as if the house were exhaling beneath their weight. Dust swirled, disturbed for the first time in years. The hallway stretched in front of them, lined with faded wallpaper that peeled like dead skin. A cracked mirror hung crooked on one wall. Sarah, curious, lifted her flashlight toward it. Her reflection stared back, pale and nervous. But then, her lips twitched into a smile. Only Sarah's mouth hadn't moved. She stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. "Did you see that?" "See what?" Fahad asked, smirking. "The reflection, it—" She stopped. What could she say? That the mirror smiled on its own. Amir, however, wasn't smiling. His eyes darted from Sarah to the mirror. He saw it too. And worse, there weren't 3 reflections. For a split second there were 4. He swallowed hard. "Let's just keep moving." They pushed deeper into the house. The rooms they passed were empty, but each felt wrong. In one, a chair sat facing the wall, as though someone had been put in time out. For eternity. In another, children's toys lay scattered across the floor, untouched for decades but clean of dust, as though still waiting to be played with. Upstairs, the silence was heavier. The doors were all closed, yet faint creaks sounded behind them, as though someone was pacing back and forth. "Probably rats," Fahad muttered, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Then Sarah spotted something on a table, a book, half-burned, its cover blackened. She picked it up and flipped through brittle pages until her flashlight landed on one sentence carved deep into the paper. "The walls whisper when I try to sleep. They know my name." Her breath caught in her throat. She slammed the diary shut. That's when it happened. Footsteps echoed behind them, slow, heavy, coming closer. The 3 spun around, flashlights slicing the dark. But the hallway was empty. Nothing but peeling wallpaper and broken doors. Fahad laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "See, just the house settling. Old wood makes noises, but Amir wasn't convinced." He leaned closer to Sarah, his voice barely a whisper. "What if the house really does? Remember?" And as if to answer him, somewhere in the distance a door slammed shut on its own. The slam echoed through the house like thunder. Dust fell from the ceiling. For a moment no one breathed. Then Sarah whispered, "We should check it out." Amir shook his head quickly. "No, we should leave. Right now." But Fahad smirked, masking the tremor in his voice. "Come on, what's the worst that could happen? A door slams. Big deal." Against Amir's better judgment, they followed the sound. The hallway stretched longer than before, almost unnatural, as if the house was rearranging itself. Finally, they reached the last door at the end of the corridor. It was darker than the others, so black it seemed to absorb the flashlight beams. Sarah reached out first. The doorknob was ice-cold, burning her palm like dry ice. She yelped and pulled back. "Here, let me," Fahad said, pushing forward. With a dramatic grin, he twisted the knob and shoved the door open. The room inside was strangely untouched. A bed stood neatly made, though the sheets were yellowed with age. Curtains rotted but still clung to the windows. On a nightstand sat a single candle burning steadily, even though none of them had lit it. The 3 of them froze. The candle's flame flickered, but it wasn't like any normal light. It felt alive, bending toward them as if curious. Sarah's flashlight swept across the walls. Her breath caught. "Oh my God!" The walls were covered in carvings, thousands of them. Not words, tally marks, countless scratches, lined up in groups of 5, stretching across every inch of plaster. Some looked fresh, edges sharp, as though someone or something had been here recently. Fahad whistled softly. "Okay, that's creepy, but maybe someone was locked up here. Like a prisoner? It's just history." But Amir wasn't buying it. His voice was low, tense. "Who lights the candle, Fahad? Who makes new marks in a house that's been empty for 50 years? The silence pressed on them like a weight. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind them. Sarah screamed and ran to the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Amir yanked at it with all his strength. Nothing. It was sealed tight, as though the house itself wanted them trapped. The candle flame grew taller, brighter, throwing huge shadows across the walls. And then those shadows moved. They peeled away from the carvings, long spidery hands stretching across the plaster, reaching down toward the floor. The whisper came next, soft, childlike. "One more." Sarah's knees buckled. What did it say? Amir's face went pale. It said, "One more." The shadows slid closer, stretching like ink across the floorboards. The candle hissed and flared, and the tally marks began to twist, reshaping into claw-like figures. Fahad tried to laugh, his voice breaking. This is just a trick. Like playing games, but then one of the shadows lunged. It wrapped around his throat. Fahad gasped, clawing at his neck as the darkness dragged him backward, pulling him into the wall. His scream was cut short, swallowed by plaster, and in the silence that followed, a brand new tally mark appeared. Carved deep and fresh on the wall, Sarah and Amir stared in horror. The whisper returned, louder this time, "One more." For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Only the candle flame hissed, tall and wild. Where Fahad had stood, there was nothing but wall, and that fresh, bleeding tally mark. Sarah clutched Amir's arm, her voice trembling. He's gone. Amir, he's gone." Amir's pulse hammered in his ears. He couldn't process what he had just seen. People don't vanish into walls. That wasn't possible. And yet, he'd watched it happen. The whisper slithered through the air again, this time all around them. One more. The shadows stretched further, reaching for their ankles. Amir yanked Sarah toward the door, kicking at the dark tendrils. His foot connected with something that felt both solid and not, like kicking through water. The shadows recoiled, but only for a moment. The doorknob rattled under his grip. Stuck. He threw his shoulder against the wood again and again. With a groan like the house was in pain, the door finally swung open. They stumbled into the hallway, hearts pounding, flashlights shaking. "Run!" Amir shouted. The corridor had changed. It wasn't the same hallway they had walked before. The wallpaper was gone, stripped down to bare wood. The floor stretched longer and the ceiling hung lower, pressing down like a coffin lid. Doors lined the hallway on both sides, all closed tight. From behind them came the sound of dozens of footsteps, fast, heavy, chasing, but there was no one there. Sarah's flashlight beam shook wildly. "This isn't real, Amir. It can't be real." He grabbed her hand. "Doesn't matter. We're getting out." They ran, breath tearing from their lungs. The doors they passed began to rattle, handles twisting as if unseen hands were trying to break free. From one door came a whisper. From another, a child's giggle. From another still, a low growl that raised the hairs on Amir's neck. One door burst open as they passed. Inside, Amir glimpsed a figure, tall, thin, its face blurred as if smeared across glass. Its arms stretched toward him. He yanked Sarah harder, pulling her past before it could step out. The hallway bent unnaturally, curving like a snake. The house was no longer just a building, it was alive, hunting them, reshaping itself to trap them inside. Ahead, a staircase spiraled down. Without thinking, they bolted toward it. The wooden steps groaned and cracked beneath their weight as if ready to collapse. Shadows swarmed along the banister, whispering louder and louder. "One more. One more. One more." At the bottom of the stairs, the front door finally came into view. Moonlight spilled through its cracks. Salvation, but when they reached it and yanked, it didn't move. The wood was stiff as stone. Sarah pounded with both fists, screaming, "Let us out! Please let us out!" Behind them, the footsteps grew closer, louder, overlapping like a crowd rushing in. Amir turned, flashlight trembling. In the beam, shapes began to emerge from the darkness, faces without eyes, mouths stretched too wide, all whispering the same word. "One more." The front door refused to budge. Amir threw his shoulder into it again and again, but the wood might as well have been steel. Behind them, the whispers rose into a chorus. The shapes in the dark moved faster, spilling down the staircase, crawling across walls and ceiling like a tide of shadows. Sarah's screams tore through the silence. She kicked the door, clawed at it, tears streaming down her face. "It won't open, it won't open." Amir turned back, flashlight flickering. The beam caught one of the figures clearly now. Its body was thin as bone, skin stretched tight, but its face was wrong. It was Fahad's. His eyes empty, mouth slack as if the house had hollowed him out. Amir froze, his chest seized with horror. Fahad? The figure tilted its head, lips curling into a grotesque smile. Then, with a voice that wasn't quite Fahad's, it whispered, "One more." Amir snapped out of his shock and grabbed Sarah's hand. "Upstairs, there's got to be another way." They sprinted, dodging grasping shadows, racing back up the staircase. The house groaned as if it hated them for running. Rooms blurred past, twisting halls, endless doors, but finally they burst into a bedroom with a broken window. The glass was jagged, the frame warped, but outside was freedom, the moonlit weeds, the night air. Amir didn't hesitate. He smashed the remaining shards with his flashlight, cutting his palm, then shoved Sarah forward. "Go!" She climbed through, scraping her hands and knees before dropping to the ground below. Amir followed, the shadows clawing at his legs, nearly dragging him back inside. With a final desperate kick, he fell through the window and landed hard beside her. They scrambled to their feet and ran, through the weeds, down the path, not stopping until the house was a distant silhouette behind them. Only when they reached the safety of Sarah's grandmother's porch did they collapse, gasping for air, shaking with terror. The night was quiet again, no whispers, no shadows, just the sound of their pounding hearts. The next morning, the villagers searched the house. No one found Fahad, no one believed Sarah or Amir. The walls were bare, the candle gone, the diary missing. To everyone else, it was just an old ruin, but Amir knew better. Because that night as he lay in bed, he heard it again, a whisper, faint but unmistakable, one more. His skin crawled. He sat up, eyes darting around the room, and then he saw it, above his bed on the wall, a tally mark. Faint, scratched deep into the plaster. Sarah, too, confessed days later. She had found one on her wall as well. The house hadn't let them go. It had only marked them, waiting, counting, because the hollow house didn't need to trap them inside forever. It could follow, and sooner or later the tally would be complete. So what do you think, my friend? Was it just an old house playing tricks on three young minds, or was the hollow house really alive, counting its victims one by one? Amir and Sarah escaped that night, but the tally marks keep appearing on their walls. Maybe the house doesn't need you trapped inside forever. Maybe once it knows your name, it follows you home. And the scariest part? The hollow house still stands, waiting, doors open, shadows restless. If you ever find yourself in a quiet village and someone warns you to stay away from a place that remembers, listen. Because once you step inside, you might not be the one who decides when you leave.